In this video, we are going to look at other ways that traits are inherited and expressed. So, as a review, let's remember that sex chromosomes determine the biologic sex, XY is a male, XX is a female. Now, the other patterns that we're going to look at are sex linked traits, incomplete dominance, codominance, multiple alleles, and polygenic traits. So, let's start with sex linked traits. What we mean by a sex-linked trait is that it is a gene that's either on the X or the Y chromosome. So it's a gene on one of the sex chromosomes. Now, most of the ones that we're going to talk about are on the X because there's very little stuff on the Y. And another thing to note is that there is a number of different diseases that are caused by sex-linked traits. Most of these are recessive traits. So, how do you show a sex linked trait? How do you indicate that this is sex linked and not just a regular trait? Well, what you do is you use the sex chromosomes in addition to the letters for the alleles. So, for example, if I wanted to show the dominant trait or the dominant allele with a sex linked trait, I would put it up over top of the X chromosome. For the recessive, I put a little h. So all that's saying is that this is a dominant allele that is found on the X chromosome. So a female, this individual is homozygous dominant. And if you notice, there's no difference between how we write it here and written just like we've done before. So all the difference here is that we're just showing that these two dominant alleles are on the two X chromosomes that this female has. Same thing here. This is a homozygous recessive female. This would be a heterozygous female, which we also call a carrier, because again, many of these traits that are recessive carry diseases. So this woman is carrying that disease trait, but she herself does not have it because she has the dominant allele as well. Males either have it or they don't. And notice we don't put any letter on the Y chromosome because the Y is different. So this gene is not found on the Y chromosome, so it is only shown on the X. Now, males are going to be more likely to get sex-linked recessive traits. So many of these kinds of diseases for the reasons that you just saw, which is they only have one X chromosome. So they only inherit or have to inherit one allele to have the disease. Females, on the other hand, have to get it from both parents. So again, if this male right here, that's the only allele he got, so he's going to have that disease. This female, she got the recessive as well, but because she has another option, both parents have to have given it to her for her to actually have that recessive trait. Now let's move on to incomplete dominance. So we've been talking about how some alleles are either dominant or recessive. In this case, though, neither allele is fully dominant. In fact, they mix together. So instead of us saying red's dominant to white, and so you cross those and you get a red flower. In this case, if we say red is incompletely dominant with white, then you cross those together and you're going to get a pink flower. So you're going to get the intermediate phenotype between the two that you crossed because they're going to mix together and find that middle ground. Codominance is similar, except in this case, both of the alleles are dominant, and so they both are expressed. So I just think of kind of co-captains. They both show up. So now, instead of red, white is pink, in this case, red, white equals spots. So both the red and the white show up. They don't mix together. They show up completely separate. Now, as we probably talked about already, most of your traits have more than just two alleles. So things like colors, eye colors, all of those things, there's not generally just this is dominant to this. There's generally lots of different alleles. So that's multiple alleles. And then along with that, most traits also aren't controlled by just one gene. So most traits are controlled by lots of genes. And we call these polygenic. Poly means many, genic, genes. So things like your height, your intelligence, your skin color, those are all controlled by lots of different genes. And because they're controlled by lots of different genes, they're expressed as a spectrum of phenotypes. And what this means is there's not, for example, one color brown for your eye color. There is a lot of different browns. And then at some point that transitions into hazel, and then it transitions into green, and so on. So there is a spectrum where there's not distinct phenotypes. And then a lot of these are also going to show up as what we call a bell curve. So here's a graph of human height. And you see number of individuals and the height. So most people fall within this general range. But some people are way to the low side, some people are way to the high side. But you can see this kind of has a bell shape, and this is called a bell curve, and this is how most polygenic traits end up expressing themselves.